Okay, we have a Russian SKS here. Never been fired, so we're gonna fire it for the first time. Go and do it. See if the sights are on. Unadjusted from the factory.
Vengeance. Why are you here? Are you here to talk about partially antiquated rifles? Well, you are in the right place today, because today we're going to be talking about the SKS. Now, this is a Russian SKS that was unfired when it came into the country, and you know what? It is absolutely gorgeous. And the SKS is among one of my favorite rifles. Of course, the M1 Garand is here. M1 Garand, best friend, SKS no longer best friend. But when I was a poor college student, the SKS was one of my first rifles that I ever owned. So it holds a place near and dear to my heart. And I think that the SKS falls at this really interesting point in history as we transition from mostly bolt action rifles to a semi-automatic rifle, but it wasn't quite the leap forward that the AKM, that the AK-47 was. And because of that, it sits in this really interesting place in history in my mind. So I hope that you guys will enjoy as we talk about the SKS rifle today. Now, before we do that, we of course have to give a big shout out to our sponsors, of course, Brownells. Brownells is super base, a big thank you to them. And of course, we have to thank Ridge Wallet, who is sponsoring this video today. A big thank you to them. We'll talk more about them later. Now, we can't forget, what, Micah? What can we? The Patreon. It's bussin'. The Patreon is all of the content and footage and pictures that I don't want posted because it is run by my camera guy. I answer questions. Get in there. It is awesome. You also have exclusive access to products pretty soon here, right, Micah?
Yeah.
That's coming forward.
Cool ones.
Yeah, cool ones. So we're doing a lot of cool stuff there. Get in there. It supports us. In any case, ladies, gentlemen, my often forgotten, but most certainly not by me, SVT 40s, welcome to the channel. Today we're talking about just a wonderful rifle here. And you know, it's kind of sad. We're gonna start right off the bat with saying that what made the SKS so cool back in the day is that you could buy an SKS for $100. And with that, you get like 1,000 rounds because it was just cheap. Nowadays, these guys are going for anywhere from 500 to 900 to 1,000. This pristine Russian SKS, at least when I got it, was quite a bit of money. So not quite as worth it anymore. But despite that, as this moves from shooter and Bubba territory into collector territory, it is still a very interesting rifle. Now, if you're not familiar with the SKS 45, the SKS is a semi-automatic rifle that is chambered in 7.62 by 3.9. It feeds from an internal magazine that is fed into by stripper clips. A lot of really interesting things about this rifle. So what we have to do before we talk about it is we have to kind of set the stage and talk about how good this rifle was. The best way to describe this rifle is to not think of it as a SVT 40 in a different caliber, but rather to think of it as a PTRS 41. Now, this rifle was, of course, a giant anti-tank rifle, but the SKS is literally a small version, SMOL. So we got the SKS 45. Now, it should also be noted that the SKS was not at all the first semi-automatic rifle that was fielded by the Soviet military. You have to understand that many other rifles had come before it, both from the designer of the SKS with the ABS-36 or with the SCT-40 or many other semi-automatic rifles that had been made. And to be clear, the SCT-40 was in many ways an awesome rifle, but it certainly had its problems. The SKS, however, was a really well-designed semi-automatic rifle. And in fact, it did see a little bit of service at the tail end of World War II. But as you guys know, after World War II ended, production really ramped up on these guys, but at the same time, the AK-47, later the AKM, would be fielded and would be found to be, in many ways, a superior weapon to this. So this ended up being made in very large quantities. However, by the time it was released, it was already not an obsolete weapon, but an obsolescent weapon, where it's not that it's not effective. In fact, in some ways, it does outclass the AKM, but really, it just fell out of favor. Now, Russia did end up exporting these in huge numbers, and not only exporting them, but they also gave out the designs for them to many other countries. So many other countries ended up making these, the East Germans, for example, to the Yugoslavians, the Chinese, the North Vietnamese, and these ended up being really popular weapons with insurgent forces for a long time until production of the AKM caught up with it and ended up replacing these particular weapons. The Chinese in particular really loved the SKS for how accurate they were. So what we're gonna do, enough history, we're not forgotten weapons. We're gonna go ahead, we're gonna go tip to butt. We're gonna talk about this guy as we would from a shooter's perspective and figure out how it is, how it compares to an AKM like we have right here, and we're just going to talk about it because it is definitely a cool design. So we're going to go ahead and start at the barrel. There are many variations when it comes to barrels on the SKS. Now with this Russian version right here, originally the Russian barrels were not chrome lined. Now, however, after being refinished in different Soviet arsenals, they were given chrome lined barrels. Now this is a refinished Russian SKS, as are most Russian SKSs. Now, almost every other barrel was chrome lined when it comes to the SKS, except for the Yugoslavians. The Yugoslavians also added a grenade launcher because you never know when you're going to need to just grenade somebody. It's always a good thing to have. Now, the SKS is a fairly accurate weapon. Now, it needs to be noted that the Soviet military doesn't do or measure accuracy like we do. The Russian military now does, but the point is when they measure the accuracy, it's not quite equivalent, but they did note that the SKS was significantly more, well, maybe significant is more of a stretch, but it was definitely more accurate than the AKM. And in fact, many of the insurgencies that have used the SKS have noted it to be a more accurate weapon. Now, to be clear, it does have a 20-inch barrel, but the 7.62 by 3.9, this round right here, it is cool, but it really does burn most of its powder. So sure, you do get a little bit more velocity out of it, but really it comes down to likely the action system just being a better consistent lockup compared to the AKM. And I found that the SKS is a very accurate platform. So I've made shots out to 480. In fact, there's a very old Garand video from back in the day where I am crushing targets at like 480 yards with a Yugoslavian SKS. So certainly doable. I think one of the big limiting factors is most certainly ammunition. Now, of course, below that, we do have a cleaning rod. Of course, that's pretty typical of Soviet militaries of that time. And below that, we have a bayonet. And the great thing about this bayonet is it is just attached to the rifle. What's great about that is you never know when you're going to need to stab somebody. So I definitely appreciate the thoughtfulness of putting the bayonet directly on the weapon so that you can't remove it. I do like that vibe. Now, we have the cleaning rod right here, and right below that, we have our bayonet. Now, this isn't sharp or anything like that. It's not made for cutting. It's made for penetrating, which I can appreciate. Sometimes someone just needs to be penetrated. So I can appreciate them having a bayonet on all of their weapons. Now, sometimes it was spiked, sometimes it was a blade, but in any case, the kind of hallmark of the SKS has always been that attached bayonet. Now, moving up from there, we do have the sights. So if we come and take a look at it, they are very typical of AK sights. We have a hooded front sight, which you want. You want to be able to protect that front sight blade. It is adjusted like your typical AK sights. Now, we do have the rear sight right here. It goes from 100 all the way up to 1,000 meters. I want you to imagine 100 drunk conscripts all firing at 1,000 meters with SKSs. Pretty incredible. But right here, we do have the battle zero position, which stands for a straight shot. That's about a 300 meter. And that does work pretty well at most distances that you're gonna be engaging with the SKS. So this is a short stroke gas piston system compared to the very long stroke of the AK. Now, you don't have to feel bad if you have a short stroke piston system. It's totally fine. It's very normal. It's just part of growing up. So the big question is we have the SKS, we have the AKM. How do they compare in terms of recoil, in terms of shootability? So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna head over into the shooting pit and we're gonna shoot these and we're gonna see how they actually look recoil-wise. Now this video is sponsored by Ridge Wallet. We have to really thank them for sponsoring this video. Now, these are actually pretty cool. It's not often that I get a product I'm like, hey, that's actually helpful for my life. So I've actually switched out from my normal fat Seinfeld wallet to this guy right here. A couple reasons why I like the Ridge wallet is one, it looks good. Also, it's very thin. You know, when you're sitting in your car and you got like that giant fat leather wallet, although they're cool looking, that's kind of causing some issues. And the third thing is that it just carries precisely what I need. So it allows me to really cut down on the bulk in my life and just make things a little bit easier. Now, what I want you guys to do is give Ridge Wallet a big thank you. Check out the link in the description. With discount code GRAND, you get 15% off. Definitely go check them out. It is actually a cool wallet and I like it quite a bit. So a big thank you to them. Let's get back to the SKS. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna try out these different weapons and see how they do recoil-wise. So we're gonna go ahead and load up the SKS from a stripper clip right here. If you can see, this is gonna be one of the limitations on the SKS because it's not the easiest to line it up. With good stripper clips, super easy to load. All right, I'm gonna try this out. SKS. All right, walks back on that last shot right there. Very easy to manage recoil. I've always found the SKS just to be very pleasant to shoot. Okay, we have the AKM from Meridian Defense. This is a pretty well-built copy. We do have a muzzle brake on the end, it should be noted, but this is pretty typical of many AKs, although this is slightly different from what you might always see. We'll go ahead and try that out. This does have a 16-inch barrel in comparison. Between the two, what's the best way to describe it? The SKS has a little bit more muzzle rise, but it feels like a lot less push. That's likely due to the longer barrel and the type of gas system that is used. The AK, in comparison, has less muzzle rise, but feels more violent in nature when pushing into your shoulder, probably due to the shorter barrel. Between the two, they are fairly equivalent, although I do give it to the SKS for being a little bit more pleasant to shoot in my mind. That being said, there are certainly some issues. The SKS was obviously designed at a time when shooting stances were different. It's much easier to shoot the AK in a modern stance and to control the recoil when compared to the SKS 45. So with that being said, let's get back, let's talk more about the SKS and finish this up. So what I really want to point out right now is kind of one of the biggest concerns when it comes to the SKS. And that is both the loading and the amount of rounds that it holds. And this is what really held it back compared to a lot of modern weapons that were coming out around that time. So the SKS is obviously fed into an internal magazine that holds 10 rounds. It's fed through stripper clips. So we're talking about in pitched battle, in the heat of battle. Now, of course, 10 rounds was great during World War II, but with the advent of kind of the modern assault rifle like the STG-44, as these became more common issue in the militaries, 10 rounds is very limiting. So in addition to that, kind of lining up those stripper clips, it's just not the easiest thing. I actually find reloading a Garand to be easier. And again, with good stripper clips, it's not bad. Again, these do feed in no problem. And so it's fairly easy to load them up. Now, if you need to unload your SKS at that point, you can simply release the bottom of the magazine, dump those rounds out, and then you can rack that last round out. Okay, so we've talked about unloading it, but now, of course, we have the internal magazine. Now, it is internal, it's non-detachable, it's attached to the weapon, it can't go anywhere because, quite frankly, they weren't sure if they could trust their troops to not lose magazines. And in fact, I think they're actually still right because I've literally seen horrible things happen to magazines in the military. From there, we can take a look at the safety. I actually do like the safety quite a bit. It's not that bad. So you can see you have the little divot for your trigger finger, and then you can simply sweep that off and get over to the trigger. Now, compared to like a Garand, I do find that easier to use. Now, with that being said, what we need to do is we need to try out that trigger together. So the first time on Garand thumb, let's go set trigger together. So feeling into it, we got a lot of play right there, about 3 millimeters. And we hit our wall. From there, about 1, 2, 3, 4, about 4 millimeters of play through that wall. About a 5.5-ish let off, reset. About that 4 millimeters again, back into that pole, about 5 total. It is actually a fairly nice military trigger, and it should be noted that AKs as well have very nice military triggers. So it is a little bit long compared to some of these Gucci triggers nowadays, but for the time, I think it was actually pretty dang good. Now, of course, compared to the AK, now the original AKM didn't have any anything to mount an optic, but it is certainly much more difficult to mount an optic well onto an SKS. There are many aftermarket parts, of course, nowadays, but it was never really adapted like the AK was out of the factory. From there, we can take a look at the stock. The stock, of course, on these Russian SKSs is a beautiful Arctic birch. It has those splotches and it just looks lovely. Many different stocks are out there, but I really like the look of these. Now, we've kind of gotten to the end here. There's not a lot more to say about it, other than to say that a lot of people will get these Russian SKSs and they will, because all the parts match, they will believe that they are they're originals, right? A lot of people think that if you have a blued bolt, that means that your weapon is refinished, and that's it. There's a lot more to it. So we're gonna take a quick look at this SKS right here, and I'll show you a couple things that could hint to your weapon being refinished. Now, it should be noted that you shouldn't be sad if your weapon is refinished, because the Soviets really did an excellent job of refinishing their SKSs. There are a couple different ways to tell if these are refinished. One of the easiest ways on my particular rifle is to look at the stock right here. We can see that it says XXX, XXX, that stands for double porn. As we have the original serial number is completely X'd out. We have a new serial number that is put on the stock right there, which is DO70, what is it? 7051. Now, sometimes you will have arsenal marks on the receiver as well, denoting that the weapon is refinished. We do not have this on ours. This one is a Tula manufactured in 1954, and as near as I can tell, that does seem to be the year that it was made, as well as the year that, or somewhere around that time, that it was also refinished. So that is pretty cool there. Another thing we can look at to tell that this thing is refinished is we can take a look at that electro pencil marking right there. That is force matching the weapon, and then also on the bottom of the internal magazine that is stamped into there, that is the same serial number. So this is a clearly refinished gun. That being said, the refinished jobs by the Russians were exquisitely done. They put a lot of pride into their work. So, you know, we kind of come to the end of the SKS here. So where does it fall? I think that certainly it's a very cool rifle. It's a very capable rifle. Certainly it is also very much so outclassed. Now, if these were still $100, $200, we're talking about a rifle that'd be really cool to have, right? 100% buy it. When we're talking about these things approaching close to 1,000 now, the SKS really isn't a buy for me anymore. Now, that being said, if you already have it and you're like, well, hell, you know, Garand Thumb said that, you know, the SKS isn't good anymore. That's not at all what I'm saying. The SKS is still a fine rifle. If you have one, train with it. That's all that's going to matter when it comes to this. So sure, there are things that will be holding you back, like we've talked about. Please don't put aftermarkets on it. Just leave them stock. These are cool weapons, and they will certainly serve you well. Now, there are tons of great places out there to get training to make sure that you're doing well with these weapons. We can go to places like Haley Strategic. Actually, please, somebody take an SKS to a Haley Strategic course. I just want you to harass them. Pat McNamara, Bear Solutions, Cogworks, tons of great guys out there. Get training. Make yourself the weapon. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. Appreciate you guys so much, and we've got nothing else for you today. Okay, final thing for you guys. Take a step back from social media. There is a wide world out there outside of social media, and it can be a little bit toxic at times. So take a step back, enjoy life, enjoy your neighbors, your community, and your friends, and just get outside of your phone, of Instagram, of everything. Step away from all this and enjoy nature, because it's gorgeous. And there's only a finite amount of your time in your life where you're going to be healthy enough and be doing well enough to be able to get out to it. So enjoy it while you can. because I promise you there'll come a time when you're not able to go anywhere or move anywhere because you're so old, and you can watch all the YouTube videos that you want. Get out there, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate you guys so much. Don't forget the Patreon. We got nothing else for you guys.